In this video, I'm going to be showing you how to use generic views in Django REST Framework so that you can have a powerful tool that you can use for very quickly putting together CRUD endpoints in your API. Hi, my name is Bryan and I help aspiring web developers level up their development skills so that they can move further in their careers. Also, if you enjoy content like this, do me a big favor and hit the like button on this video. It helps the YouTube algorithm recommend these types of videos to other aspiring developers. Hit the subscribe button if you want to see more content like this in the future. Hit the notification bell if you want to be notified when I release new videos. And there's links in the description for things like joining my value-packed newsletter and for following me on other social platforms like Twitter, or X now technically, where I post more often. With that, let's get into generic views. So why generic views? These views abstract out a lot of logic, so when you're putting together common CRUD operations, you can do it very quickly. And this gives you the ability to just put together a full CRUD API with just very few lines of code. But because they abstract so much code away, they can be a bit confusing since there's a lot of hidden logic behind the scenes, and we're going to be diving into this logic so that you can understand how these views work. So with that, let's get into seeing how to build a full CRUD API using these generic views. So here I have the Django REST Framework documentation open, and then here under the API guide, you have this generic view section, and this gives you a full rundown of these generic views. So you have the generic API view. This is a class that all of the generic views inherit from, and they also inherit from these different mixins. So these are model mixins. You have like the list, create, retrieve, update, destroy. And then things like list are going to inherit the list model mixin. Things like create are gonna inherit the create model mixin. Then you also have combinations. So you have things like list create. So that's going to inherit the generic API view, the list model mixin, and the create model mixin. So all of these just inherit different combinations of these mixins along with the generic API view. So let's dive into exactly how these kind of work. So I have VS Code open inside of a folder called generic view. I'm going to open up my terminal, and I'm using Python 3.11.3. I'm going to set up a virtual environment. Then I'm going to activate it, and I'm going to install Django REST Framework. Then I'm going to clear, do a pip freeze requirements.txt. I'm going to get all of my requirements inside of this file. And now I have access to the Django admin CLI, so I can do Django admin start project, and I'll call this generic _ views, and I'm going to create that in the current directory. So now I have this project folder along with the manage.py. So I could do Python manage.py start app, and I'll make a products app. So the idea is I'm going to create a full CRUD API which revolves around products. So we're going to be able to list products, retrieve them, create them, update them, and delete them, and we're going to do it all with generic views. So let's get into just that. First thing I'll do is I'm going to open up this product and open up the models, and let's create a product model. So I'll create a class of product, which will inherit models.model, and then my products are going to have a slug, and then this is going to be models.slug field, and these slugs are going to be unique, so I'll pass unique equals true. And then the idea is that these slugs, they're going to be what we look up products with, because by default, you use the primary key, which is the ID of the product, to, let's say, retrieve a product or update or delete a product, but I want to use the slug instead. And then each product is going to have a name. That'll be a char field. And then it's going to have a price. I'll do models.integer field. And that should be good enough. I don't want to do anything too complicated. The idea is not to make a complex product model, but to show generic views, so I'll leave it at that. And then because I created a model in this app, I have to go into the settings, go into installed apps, and then place my products app here. And then another thing I have to set up is REST Framework. So that's all I really need to put inside of the installed apps. So I'm going to close that up. And then in my terminal, I'll do Python manage.py make migrations because I created this product model. And then I'm going to apply those migrations with manage.py migrate. And then that'll apply these migrations to my SQLite database, and then I can just run my server. So there we go. Now I'm going to go inside of the views. I'm going to remove everything that's in here, and this in particular is in the products app. And then I'm going to do from REST Framework generics, and I'm going to import all those different generic views. So there's 9 in total. So we have the ListAPI view, and I have to make sure I have the import here. So ListAPIView, CreateAPIView, RetrieveAPIView, UpdateAPIView, and DestroyAPIView. So these are the 5 individual ones. So we're going to get started with these first. And then another thing I need to do is set up a serializer. So I'm going to create a serializers.py file, do from REST Framework, import serializers. And I'm also going to have to import my product model. So I'll do that with from .models, import product. And then set up a class called product serializer, which will inherit serializers.modelSerializer. Set up the class of meta, set the model to be product, and then fields I'll set to all fields. So that's all we have to do for the serializer. And then within here, some other imports I'm going to need is from my models, I'm going to need the product, and from my serializers, I'm going to need that product serializer I just set up. So let's start off with creating the list generic API view. So I'm going to do class list product or list products API view. That's going to inherit this list API view. And then to this, what we have to pass is the query set. So that's an attribute that is required. And then we can do product objects all to this. And then we also have to specify the serializer class, which is going to be my product serializer. And that's literally all we need in order to set this up. And then we just have to wire this up to a URL endpoint. So inside of here, I can create a urls.py, do from Django URLs, import path, and then set my URL patterns to be a list where I have my path. And then in here, I have to also import the view. So from my views, I'm going to import the list products view. And then the endpoint I'm going to have something like /API/products/. So then in here, what I can do is have products/, then pass this in, do .asView, because this is a class-based view, and set a name of products. And then in the root_urls.py, I'm going to need to import include and set up another path, which is going to be API/. That's going to include products URLs. So this way I have an API endpoint set up, which is API/products/. And then that's going to utilize this view I set up, which is my generic view. That's going to list all of my products. So it's this easy to create an endpoint that does this. So let's see this in action. So I'm going to open up Postman. And then I'm going to send a GET request to localhost 8000 API products/. And if I send this, I get a 200 OK, and I get an empty list because I have no products yet. So that's going to be the next thing I'm going to do. I'm going to create an endpoint to create products. And then maybe before I do that, I'm just going to dive into this ListAPI view quickly. So I can hold Command and click or Control click if you're on Windows. And then we can just take a look at this. Something I was explaining before in the documentation, but this ListAPI view, it inherits 2 things, the generic API view, and then also this mixin, which is list model mixin. And then list model mixin, this is this right here, it defines this list method, and then that has this query set, and then it wraps it in this filter query set. If you have filters you apply. It also has pagination. So if you have pagination enabled, it's going to go within here and then give you a paginated response. If you don't have pagination, it's simply just going to return your list of data. and then that's going to be based on the query set that you provide. Then on top of that, we also have generic API view, and then this is what has this query set and serializer class, which you have to define. It also has a lookup field of primary key by default. So this is a field that you can overwrite on things like your retrieve, update, or delete. And then you have things like filter backends that you can provide, pagination classes. By default, they will just be whatever the default is in Django REST Framework or whatever you define if you override that REST Framework setting. You also have get query set, and then this is just going to retrieve your query set. And if you want to do something more custom, you can always override this method. And then you have get object, which will get the object, so in our case, product. And then things like get serializer, and then some other stuff in here as well. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to go into my views.py and set up that CreateView. So I'll do a class of CreateProductAPIView. That's going to inherit my CreateAPIView. And then I'll pass the query set to this of product objects all, and serializer class of product serializer. And also I realized serializer I didn't spell quite correctly, so that's going to be something I quickly do. I did product serializer, should be like this. And then I have to import it correctly and apply it correctly. So there's a small typo on there. So now with that, the next thing I can do is go into my urls.py, create a new path underneath here, which will be products create / and then I'm going to import that create product view. So create product API view, and I forgot to pass the comma, so let's do that. I'm going to use this thing here, and then for the name I'll do products create. Maybe this one can be products list. And with that, you can test out creating a product. So to create a product, I'm going to need the slug, the name, and the price. So I'm going to send a post request to localhost 8000 API products create / I'm going to send content type of application JSON. And then if I send as is, we do have validation in place with these generic views, so I don't have to set any of that up. So I'm going to pass a slug, which will be t-shirt. Name is going to be t-shirt as well. And then the price. And if I do something like this, let's say, I'm going to get validation around the price, so I need a valid integer, so I'll pass 20. And with that, we created the t-shirt. So now here, if I list my products, I'm going to now get a list of my one product that I created. So there we go. We have 2 endpoints in place. Now I'm going to close up some of these files, and then let's start working on the retrieve. I'm going to create a retrieve product API view. That's going to inherit the retrieve API view. I'm going to pass the query set of product objects all. So you would think here you might do something like filter and then filter by the ID or the slug, but that is not how you set this one up. You will pass all. You're going to pass the serializer class, and then that'll be product serializer, and then behind the scenes it's going to utilize whatever the lookup field is. So right now by default it's the primary key, so we can test with that. Then just have to set up a URL, which is going to be retrieve product API view. I'm going to set up a new path. I'm going to utilize this retrieve product API view, and then I'll do products / retrieve. And then I need to have the lookup field, which will be primary key. And then this will be products retrieve. So let's test that out. I'm going to make a new GET request to localhost 8000 API products retrieve / the primary key, which is 1. But this is an endpoint that I want to use the slug for. So I want to pass something like t-shirt here, and then click send, and then I want it to find that. So in order to do that, I have to go to the view, and I have to pass the lookup field and set that to be slug. And then on top of that, I have to go to my URL, and I have to set this to be slug. And then I can also have a type of slug to this if I want. And with that, if I send this, now it's going to actually retrieve my t-shirt using the slug as the lookup field. So next, I want to be able to update a product. So I'll do class update product API view. This will inherit the update API view. And it's going to look the exact same as this. So I'm going to have my query set of product objects all, serializer class of product serializer, and the lookup field of slug. And then with that, I just have to set up the endpoint. So update product API view, and then set up the path of products, update, and then I'm going to use the slug. And then update product API view dot as view and set a name of products update. And I'm going to save that. And now we can test updating a product. So with the update, so we are inheriting this update API view. And if I click into this, this is going to handle both a put and a patch. So I'm going to actually test out both of these request methods. So first I'll do the put. And then for the endpoint, it's going to be localhost 8000 API products update, and then the lookup field, which will be t-shirt. And then let's say if I want to update the name from t-shirt to be hat, and I send this, what's going to happen is I need to provide the slug and the price as well. That's how the put request works. You have to pass all the fields. So in that case, I'm going to pass the slug, which in this case is going to be updated to hat. And then I'm going to have price. And then for the price, I'll update it to be, say, 25. So if I send this, now this got updated. So if I retrieve, and by retrieve I mean list all the products, now I'm going to get a hat instead of the t-shirt. And if I go to retrieve t-shirts, it's no longer going to be there, because now it just got updated to be hat. So there we go. Now the patch, on the other hand, I don't have to pass all the fields to it. So I'll send a patch request to localhost 8000 API products update, and then I have hat now because I updated it to that. And then I'll pass content type of application JSON. And then in this case, maybe I want to update the price. So instead of 25, maybe I want it to be 35. So I can send that, and it'll work. I don't have to pass the slug and the name now. I can just pass one field that I want to update. So the final one to set up is going to be the destroy. So class destroy product API view. It's going to inherit DestroyAPIView, and it's going to take the same fields as this. So I'm going to use the slug to find the product I want to destroy, and then we're going to destroy it. So I just have to set up the API endpoint for this. So I'm going to import the destroy product API view. I'm going to create a new path, which will be products/destroy/the slug. And then the name products destroy. And I'll save that. And now I have an endpoint created. So now I'm going to hit with a delete request, localhost 8000/API products destroy, and then hat is the slug. So if I send this, I get a 204 no content, which means that this was successful in deleting. And if I were to send it again, I have detail not found because I no longer have the hat. If I list, I also have nothing. So there we go, it worked. So now going back here. Typically, when you put together REST APIs for doing these CRUD operations, you're not really gonna have URLs that look like this. You're not gonna have product/ and then product/create. The way that this is typically gonna look is something like API products/. This with a GET request would list all products, and with a POST request, it would create a product. So you'd be hitting the same URL endpoint with two different request methods, either a GET or a POST, and that would handle list and create. Then you'd have another one of API products/ let's say the slug. And then this endpoint would handle the GET, the put, the patch, and the delete. So with the GET, you would retrieve the product. With put or patch, you'd update the product. And with the delete request, you would delete the product. So that's typically how you would see this set up. So let's see how we can set up something that's more like this, because that's a little bit more realistic for a CRUD API. So I'm going to comment out all of these that I created. And then I'm also going to go here and I'm just going to comment out all of these paths and comment out this import. Now let's go back to the view. And then I'm going to also comment out this, and I'm going to import some of the other generic views. So from REST Framework generics, I'm going to import ListCreateAPIView. So this one's going to handle both the list and the create. So if I actually go into this one, you're going to see that it inherits both the create model mixin and the list model mixin. And then it handles both a GET and a POST. The GET will do the list, and then the POST will do the create. And then the list comes from here. That's the list, and the create comes from here, which does the creation. It gets the serializer, sees if it's valid. If it's not, it'll do the raise exception and return a validation error. If it doesn't do that, it'll perform create, which will just do the save on the serializer. It'll get the success headers, pass that down to the response with a status of 201 and the data that was created. That's the way the create works. List just gets them, lists them out. We went over this one before. Retrieve will just get the instance using getObject, and then it'll pass that down to the serializer and return the data with a default status code of 200 if you don't pass anything to the response. And then update, this will handle both an update and a partial update. So update's going to be the put request, what's handled. Partial update's going to be what's handled by the patch. And then you also have destroy, where you just get the instance, you perform the destroy, which will do instance.delete, and then you just return a response with a 204 status code. So that's how that works. So with that, let's now set this list create up. I'm going to do class list create product API view. That's going to inherit this. And then I'm going to pass the query set of product objects all and the serializer class of product serializer. Next, I'm going to go to the URLs, and then from views, I'm going to import my list create product API view. And then I'm going to create a path, which is going to be products/. This will be list create product API view .as view. And then name is going to be products list. So with that, let's now test out this endpoint, which is going to handle both the get and the post. So first I'll do the get. That will get an empty list of products because I have no products. So let's create one. So now this endpoint has changed. I no longer have this create slash part, so I'm going to delete that. And I'm going to create a t-shirt. So I'm going to send that. And there we go. We created a t-shirt with ID 2. So back here, if I list, there we go. Same endpoint, also lists. And then on top of that, we can even create more products. So I can create maybe a hat. And that'll be, say, 35. And there we go. We have a hat now, and if I list, I have 2 products now that I'm listing. So now back to the code. Let's now experiment with some of these other ones. So we have things like RetrieveUpdateAPIView, and we have RetrieveDestroyAPIView. First, I'm going to try out the RetrieveUpdateAPIView. So I'll do class of RetrieveUpdateProductAPIView. This will be my RetrieveUpdateAPIView that I'm inheriting. I'll pass the query set of product objects all. Serializer class will be my product serializer, and then I'll have my lookup field, which is going to be slug. So with that, I can go to my URLs, and then I can import this, and then I can create a new path, which is going to be products/slug/. That's going to be my RetrieveUpdateProductAPIView, and I'll pass a name of products retrieve and save that. So now we can test that out. So I can go here, I can try to retrieve my hat, and I changed the endpoint. I no longer have this retrieve part, so I'm just going to delete that, send the request. Now I can retrieve my hat, and I can also retrieve my t-shirts. So I'll pass t-shirt here as a slug, and there we go. Now we can also update. So maybe I want to update the, let's say, hat to be pants. So I'll update the slug, I'll update the name to be pants, and I'll update it to be 50. So we can send that. And of course, I forgot to do this again. Our endpoint is API products/the slug, so I'm going to get rid of the update part, send that, and that's going to update the hat to pants. So now if I go here and retrieve, I expect to see t-shirt and pants. And there we go. So that worked. I can also send a patch to maybe update the pants. And then the pants, instead of being 50, I want it to be, say, 65. So I'll send that. And once again, I have to get rid of this update part. I keep forgetting to do that. So I'll send that off, and there we go. It's got updated. So now I can send my list again, and now I see the updated price. And now the delete, we did not set this one up. And also this destroy part's not going to be there. I'm not going to forget to do that for like the 10th time. So if I want to try to destroy something like the t-shirt, which we do have the t-shirt right here, and I send that off, this is not going to work because method delete is not allowed. So I get a 405 error status code. So let's test out using the retrieve destroy now. So I'm going to comment out this one, and I'm going to set up the class of RetrieveDestroyAPIView, which is going to be RetrieveDestroyAPIView. That's what it's going to inherit. Also, I accidentally opened this up, so let's close that. And this will have the query set of products, objects, all, serializer class of product serializer, and that has to have an equal. And then the lookup field, which is going to be slug. So I'll save that, go to my URLs. So I no longer have this one, so I'm going to comment it out. And I'm going to pass the RetrieveDestroyAPIView. And then I'll comment out this path. And then below it, I'll set up my path of products/slug. That's going to use the RetrieveDestroyAPIView. Pass a name of products retrieve. Save that. And we can now test this out. So if I try to update to say 50, send that, I no longer have a patch method. Or if I try to update pants to be say 40 in price, no longer have a put method, but I do have the retrieve. So I can retrieve the t-shirt, I can retrieve the pants, and then I can also delete. So maybe I want to delete the pants. So previously delete was not allowed, but now we're able to delete. We get a 204 status code. So if I now go to list, I only have the t-shirt. So perfect, that one worked. And then finally, let's implement the final one so that we can have this CRUD API endpoint the way that you typically expect. So I'm going to comment out both of these. And then I'm going to bring in the RetrieveUpdateDestroyAPI view. I'm going to comment out this one. And then right over here, I'll do class of RetrieveUpdateDestroyAPIView. That's going to inherit RetrieveUpdateDestroyAPIView. I'll pass the query set to this of product objects all. We'll pass the serializer class of product serializer and the lookup field of slug. And then finally, just got to set up an endpoint for this. So I'll comment out this one. And I'll comment out this import, and I'll bring in my RetrieveUpdateDestroyProductAPIView. And then maybe right below here, I'll do my path, which is going to be products/the slug. I'll utilize the RetrieveUpdateDestroyProductAPIView, chain on as view, pass the name of products retrieve. And maybe this one I'll put right below here. So there we go. Now we have a full CRUD API set up for the products. And it really takes as little code as this. All we need is the list create and the retrieve update destroy. And then just set up URL endpoints for both of those. And then we have a full CRUD API using generic views. So this is why the generic views are so powerful. It takes very few lines of code to set up a full CRUD API. So now let's finally test this out. And now I can just test out literally all of these. So I can try to create another product. So I'll create a hat. Now if I list, I'm gonna have the t-shirt and the hat. I can also create pants. And those will be a price of 50. There we go. We can create, we can list again. We can retrieve, so I can retrieve pants. I can retrieve hats. And then we can also update. So maybe I want to update the pants to be a price of 100. And then also here I have to pass pants, because I can't update hat to be the slug of pants since that already exists. So let's send that. There we go, we updated pants. So now if I retrieve, this should be updated to 100. And it is, perfect. You can also use the patch. So maybe I want to update the hat. And I'll update the name of the hat. And it'll just be cool hat. So there we go. We updated that. So now if I retrieve, I see the name was updated. And then I can also delete. Maybe I want to delete the hat. So I'll do that. 204 no content. If I go to list now, I no longer have the hat. So there we go. We implemented the full CRUD API using generic views. So that will be everything for this video. If you enjoyed the video, do me a big favor and leave a like on the video to help the YouTube algorithm shove this video in front of the faces of other developers. Subscribe to the channel if you want more content like this. Hit the notification bell if you want to be notified when I release new videos. Then there's also links in the description where you can join my value packed newsletter and follow me on other social platforms like Twitter or X, where I post more often. With that, I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Peace.